Sally that girl in the kitchen. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally that girl in the kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make my no-knead Kalamata olive artisan bread. Yes, I'm going to be teaching you how to make an artisan bread, which is really easy to put together. And what makes this one special is that we're going to be adding Kalamata olives to it, Greek olives. It gives it an incredible flavor, and this is going to be a delicious bread that you are going to love and you're going to want to make all of the time. As a woman of Sephardic Turkish heritage, how could I not love Greek olives, being that Greece and Turkey are neighbors, and the dishes that are Greek and Turkish are usually very similar to each other. So this is one of my favorites, and I'm sure you are going to love it. So let's not wait another second, and let's get started. For today's recipe, you will need 3 cups of bread or all-purpose flour. I prefer bread flour. 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. 1/2 teaspoon of active dry yeast. 1.5 cups of lukewarm water, and 30 pitted Greek Kalamata olives, each of which you've cut into thirds. You will also need some parchment paper, some plastic wrap, a large bowl, a dough whisk, a whisk or a large fork, a wet measuring cup, some measuring spoons, and either a lame or a sharp knife for scoring your bread. You will also need a Dutch oven with a lid or any large heavy pot with a lid. Just be sure that both your pot and your lid can withstand high temperatures, and the knob is also made to withstand high temperatures. I actually have a second pot that I use that is a cazuela that I replaced the knob on so that I can also bake bread in it. So just be sure it's all oven safe to high temperatures. And of course, you'll need some oven mitts and a cooling rack to allow your bread to cool. This recipe is so easy, you are going to love it. But it does take a little patience because it takes a little time for the yeast to do its magic. So either work on it in the morning and allow it to rise during the day, or I am going to be working on it in the evening before I go to bed, and that way it'll be ready in the morning for me to bake it. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is cut your olive. So this is the type of olive that I am using, and I just like to slice it into thirds, but of course you can just chop them up or cut them however you like. Then measure out your flour and add it to your large bowl. When I'm making any of my no-knead artisan breads, I create a mound with my flour. I do the opposite of what I do in a lot of my breads, where I make a well in the center. For this type of bread, you want a mound. Another thing that's different about this bread is that I use kosher salt because we are not going to be kneading this bread. So I have no concern that the larger salt crystals will be breaking up my dough as I knead it because I won't be kneading this dough. So I like to use kosher salt, but I do sprinkle it on the outer edge of the flour. Since I won't be activating my yeast, I'm going to be adding it onto the center of my flour. So I want to keep the salt separate. So now go ahead and measure out your active dry yeast and then just add it to the center of your mound. I'm keeping the salt and the rest of the ingredients away from my yeast, and then I'm going to slowly bring them together. So now measure out your water and put it in a microwave safe container and then warm it up just to lukewarm. You don't want it super hot, just warm. Now add your lovely Kalamata olives, and then I do the same. I just sprinkle them on the outer edge of my flour. The only ingredient right now in the center is going to be my yeast. And now finally, I grab my water that is now lukewarm, just warm to the touch, and then I gently pour it on the outer rim of my flour. Now, once all of my water is in, then I grab my dough whisk or whatever your preferred utensil is, and then I'm going to gently just give everything a little bit of a stir. I'm incorporating that yeast, and then little by little, I'm bringing the ingredients from the outer edge in. All I'm going to do now is gently incorporate my ingredients. Remember, this is a no-knead bread, so really all we want to do is mix our ingredients together. We are looking to create a shaggy dough. There's no kneading involved. It's super quick. Just bring your ingredients together until you no longer notice loose flour. You're just going to create a wet and shaggy dough. The dough will come together very quickly. It shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes to just scrape the sides of your bowl with your tool and just make sure that you get all that flour in. And then once you do, this is what it should look like. It's just a shaggy dough. And then you use your hands to remove whatever has been stuck onto your tool. And you are pretty much done with your part that you're going to be doing either the night before or in the morning. Your dough is together and that's it. There's nothing to it. It's really, really easy. All we have to do now is grab some plastic wrap, and you do want to cover your bowl well. You want to make sure that your dough doesn't dry out because it's going to be slowly rising on your counter either overnight or during most of the day. So you really want to make sure that your dough does not dry out. It has to be well covered. I have baked my no-knead artisan breads after 4 hours of a rise, and although you do get a nice bread, you definitely get a better rise if you wait longer. So 8, 10, 12 hours, that is preferred. So that's why I like to use this overnight technique, or I do it in the morning and bake it for dinner. So now that your dough is well covered, just find a corner in your kitchen where there's not a lot of traffic and your dough will not be disturbed. Just let it sit in its bowl and let the yeast work its magic and let time do its thing. So this is what the dough will look like after it has had time to rise. In my case, it is now the next morning. And the first thing I want to do is put my Dutch oven into a cold oven. I want to put it in with my lid and all. And then I'm going to turn the temperature on my oven to 450 degrees. This bread bakes hot, but the Dutch oven itself needs to warm, so it needs time. So I'm going to set 45 minutes on my timer to allow the oven to heat up with the Dutch oven inside of it. And that will really help to give my bread a beautiful rise. Now, once my Dutch oven is in the oven and the oven is warming, uncover your dough and then just put that plastic wrap aside because you are going to use it again. Then find a spot on your counter where you can work and lay out a sheet of parchment paper. You want the parchment paper to be long enough to be able to carry your loaf into the hot Dutch oven. So make sure there's plenty of room for your dough and that it's long enough to nicely fit into your Dutch oven. Then bring your flour over because you're going to want to sprinkle some flour with a spoon onto that parchment paper because we are now going to shape our dough into a loaf. The flour will help keep the dough from sticking to our parchment paper. Of course, you can do this on your counter and then transfer it onto parchment paper if you'd like, but I like to build it right on top of my parchment. So once the flour is on my paper, you see those beautiful bubbles? That means that my yeast has done its work. So grab your bowl and then you're going to turn your dough out onto this parchment that has been dusted with flour. I like to gently use my fingers to help the dough release itself from the bowl because this is a wet, sticky dough after all, so it's going to need some help. So just gently turn your bowl over and then very gently release the dough. You don't want to overhandle your dough because the less you handle it, the more the rise. You have these beautiful air pockets and you want to keep them so that you have a beautiful bread. So now, once you've released the dough from the bowl, grab your bread flour and your spoon, and then you're going to sprinkle a little more flour onto the dough, and you can sprinkle some on your hands, and it's just going to help you work the dough very gently and not have it stick to your fingers, and it'll help it stick less to the parchment paper. Notice that I have not punched down this dough, nor did I knead it at all. I just turned it over onto the parchment, and I'm going to use my hands and a bit of flour to shape my dough into a loaf. You can create whatever loaf shape you want, and of course, if you have any stray little olives, just press them right back in, and then create the loaf shape that you prefer. I'm going to be creating a round bowl, but any shape is fine. And to create a bowl, I like to fold my dough over onto itself, because that way it really helps me avoid having a flat bread. You really want your bread to have a nice tall character to it. So folding the dough onto itself really helps give your dough that structure and that beautiful rise that you want in a really nice artisan bread. So what I do is I fold the dough over onto itself, and yes, it will stick a little to the parchment. That's why I said if you want to do this on your counter, that's okay. I just prefer not having to transfer it over once I've already shaped it, and that way it's already on the parchment. So I just fold the dough over onto itself, and then you see it's already developing a taller loaf. So you can leave it like this if you prefer a long bread, or you can continue to shape the loaf to make it into a round shape, which is a bowl. That's what I'm aiming for. So once again, I'm just going to dust my hands a little because my dough has been sticking. And then I'm going to continue to gently shape my dough because I want to make it round. So what I do is I kind of go around and I use my hands and I just tuck the dough under itself. And this will give me a taller bread. It will definitely make a difference when it bakes. So I really like to make it into a round bread because you get a taller, really pretty looking bread. So remember, you're being very gentle. You're just using your hands and tucking the dough under itself, and you are being in no way rough on your dough. You don't want to pop those beautiful air pockets running through your dough. You just want to bring your dough together and shape it into a beautiful circular shape. Now, once you're happy with the shape of your dough and you've managed to create a beautiful round ball, you are going to grab the plastic wrap that you had set aside earlier, and you're going to use it to cover your dough because just like before, you want to keep the dough from drying out while your Dutch oven is warming up in the oven. So just keep it on your counter covered while the Dutch oven heats. Now, a few minutes before the Dutch oven is ready, then you come back to your bread and uncover it, and we're going to give it one last dusting of a little flour. And the reason we do this is it helps us score our bread, plus it gives it that beautiful finish, and it really looks like you bought your bread in a beautiful bakery. It's very impressive, and I really love to dust my breads with some flour because it really gives it that nice artisan look to it. So just gently use your hands to spread the flour on your dough, and then once you've coated your dough with a light coating of flour, you are going to then use your lame or a sharp knife, and you are going to cut a plus sign in the center of your loaf. The purpose of these cuts is to allow your bread to expand while it is baking, and it also helps control where the bread will split open because the bread will try to split while it bakes. So by giving it this cut, you control where it splits and it looks absolutely beautiful. Of course, it still may split somewhere else too, and that's totally fine. So now bring your loaf near your stove because you're going to bring out your hot Dutch oven now that your 45 minutes have passed, and it's going to be super, super hot. So you want your dough real close by. Then very carefully with your oven mitt on, remove the hot lid and use the parchment paper to carefully place the dough inside your Dutch oven. Be really careful as the inside of the Dutch oven is very hot, as is the lid. So use your mitts and put the lid back on, and then of course carefully transfer your Dutch oven back into your hot oven and close the door. Then set a 30-minute timer to allow the bread to bake. After the first 30 minutes, very carefully remove the hot lid from your Dutch oven and then put the Dutch oven in uncovered to continue baking, and set another 7-minute timer to allow your No-Knead Kalamata Olive artisan bread to finish baking. After those 7 minutes have passed, very carefully remove the Dutch oven from your hot oven and admire your beautiful bread. It looks spectacular. It's split exactly where we cut it, and it's got that beautiful dusting of flour that makes it look really rustic, and it really looks like you just bought this bread at a fancy bakery. So very carefully, because the Dutch oven is still super hot, grab your parchment paper and do not touch, of course, your Dutch oven. It is very, very hot. And lift your bread out of the hot Dutch oven and onto your cooling rack. Then, once again, very carefully and using your parchment, just pull the parchment paper out from under your hot bread. And look at how spectacular that looks. Look at that beautiful rise, because we folded our dough over and it's got a beautiful toasty lip on top, and it just looks airy and spectacular. You are going to love this bread. So I'm going to prepare a little marinated feta so that I can have it with my incredible Kalamata olive artisan bread, because what could be better with Kalamata olives than feta? So I prepared just a little marinade with some olive oil, lemon juice, a little cracked black pepper, a little touch of red pepper flakes, and a sprinkle of my homegrown and home-dried oregano. Look at how beautiful this looks, and so appetizing. Of course, the bread is perfect by itself or with a little drizzle of olive oil on it. It's really so delicious, and it's going to be even better with that beautiful feta that I marinated. I cannot wait to try it. And of course, preparing this little marinated feta gave my bread some time to cool a bit, because you do want to allow it to cool about 30 minutes on that cooling rack before cutting into it. You don't want to squish it because it's got that beautiful rise and it's crunchy and crusty. So definitely wait just a bit before cutting into your bread. Now, once you've waited about 30 minutes, it's time to cut, and look at that bread, how spectacular it looks. Look at those beautiful Kalamata olives running through it, and it just has those beautiful air pockets from rising slowly, and it is so fragrant. It has that beautiful fresh bread smell combined with that delicious, almost tangy Kalamata olive smell. It is really incredible. It looks so beautiful. I just cannot wait to taste it. So I'm going to have to take a bite of it just as is, because I really just want to get the flavor of this delicious bread with these yummy olives. So before I add my marinade to it, I really want to just try my bread. Here I go. It looks so great. Wow, it tastes spectacular. It's got that tang from the Kalamata olives, almost a little briny flavor, really incredible. And of course, the bread itself is airy and crusty. It's really spectacular. Look how beautiful it looks. Even the bottom of the bread is crusty. It's just spectacular. That Dutch oven, nice and hot, really does its job. Now, I cannot wait to try it with this delicious marinated feta, that bit of olive oil and fresh lemon and herbs. This is going to be so delicious. Wow. I love serving this bread like this. Look at how beautiful. It smells incredible. Oh, wow. This is so great. You are going to love this bread. Wow, that is so good. That olive oil together with the Kalamata olives and the feta cheese. I mean, how could you go wrong? Spectacular. So tasty. I have no doubt you are going to love this bread as much as I do. So, so good. I need to give you another look at the inside of this bread because it is really so spectacular looking. Look at those beautiful Kalamata olives and air pockets running through this bread. And how easy was it to put together? Incredible. So how easy was that, and how yummy does it look? And this recipe is so versatile because you can change the add-ins. If you don't want to go with Kalamata olives, you can put whatever you want in this no-knead artisan bread. I've made it with sun-dried tomato and basil. I've made it with cheese, different kinds, sharp, cheddar, Parmesan, Asiago. You can go anywhere you want. You can do it with herbs. In my home, they love it with rosemary, a touch of olive oil, and a little extra pinch of sea salt, and it is spectacular. You can play with this recipe however you want. But if you make it like this, it's absolutely delicious and you are going to love it. Trust me. No, better yet, don't trust me. You're gonna have to try to make this recipe yourself. And if you've enjoyed today's recipe, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And most importantly, remember to subscribe to my channel and to touch that little notification bell so that you don't miss out on a single amazing, delicious, different, easy, yummy recipe that I have planned for you. See you next time. Sally that girl in the kitchen.